Hi. I want to share a dream that I had from on October 6th, 2016, on a Thursday. And it took some time, but the Lord gave me the interpretation for it. So I will read the dream and then I will share the interpretation. Um, I dreamed I came into a parking lot, and there were Christians all in the parking lot. Um, I recognized many, but in the dream I recognized many. But when I woke, I only remembered seeing a, a pastor that's in his 70s that's at my church. Um, he's the only one I remembered. Some I did not know at all, some of these Christians. At one point, I looked around and realized all but me and a lady that I'd never met before, and this elderly pastor. We were the only ones that weren't teenagers or in our 20s, early 20s. So we're all in this parking lot, and I do come up to this woman and introduce myself and ask her where she went to church, or where she at one time went to church. And she was hesitating to answer me, but we did begin to talk about God. I knew she was a Christian. I'm not sure how I knew that, but in the dream, there was something in the course of the events that um, I was certain that she was a follower of Jesus Christ. Um, there was a teenager that I saw that was in emotional distress, and this teenager was taken by the elderly pastor into the building that's there. It wasn't a church, but I think it could have symbolized a church. Anyway, and he took him inside to minister to him. Um, there was a lot of joy. I remember hearing a lot of laughter, a lot of fellowship, and very clearly recognizing that these young people, what they were doing was all about ministry. I don't know specifically what, but it was all these young people with all this energy and laughter, and them doing the ministry of Jesus Christ. And then there was me and this other lady, and I'm 45, and she looked to be around my age, maybe a little older. Um, at some point, while I'm in the midst of all these young people, and this lady and I are talking, I look out in the direction of in this field. I look into this field, and it's it's in the dream. It was something that was very familiar to me. Um, it was a field that I had been watching for a while and expecting something from. And I looked out, and it was real dry and parched. The area, the field itself, was very very dried, parched, and it was sand though, and it was just really dirty sand. But as I looked, I noticed in the farthest part away from me in the field, I saw something green and lush growing, and I got excited, and so uh, over. I walked into the field, walking over the hard, crusty sort of sand, dirty, where nothing can grow. Nothing is supposed to be able to grow here. And I make my way, and I look, and it's a perfect row of green, lush, um, some type of crop. I say that because it wasn't rigid and disorganized. It seemed as if a hand, you know, someone of intelligent design, so to speak, had part and had planted this and caused this to grow up. And I was very excited when I saw this because it was impossible that this would happen. And I remember saying in the dream, it's finally happening. It's happening. And I was very excited because something that I had been waiting for a long time to happen was actually happening. I noticed the sand right in front of me, kind of like the row that would be the road right in front of it. Um, the green right in front of the green lush row it was very wet sand, and I knew that this area was about to be the same thing was about to happen. There was going to be another row of a crop, so to speak, growing up green and lush. I was rejoicing, and I began to run my fingers through the sand, the wet sand, and I was excited. But then I looked ahead of me, and I began to have a vision. It's kind of interesting to have a dream from God, and in that dream, God gives me a vision. In the vision, I saw a house, and it was a very beautiful, I mean, it wasn't ornate. Don't get me wrong. It was a clean, that's the best way to put it, clean, simple, one story, white house. And what I saw happen was this great amount of smoke, massive amount of smoke, just began to pour into this house. And then I saw the smoke, the same smoke, making its way out of the house through the windows, like almost bursting the front door open. Just just this massive amount of smoke. And I didn't see a fire anywhere. And this White House was completely undamaged, but the smoke had gone through it. And then the next part of the dream, I am sitting with this woman that I had befriended, um, and I am drawing a picture of this house and the smoke, and I'm using a white crayon to sort of cover over it and show the smoke and the massive smoke. And she and I were talking, I think, a little about it. She was asking me questions, and after that, that's the end of the dream. So, interpretation. The interpretation for this dream is about the present, what's actually happening right now in the spiritual realm. Um, we may not see it as God sees it in the big picture. We only see what goes on in our own individual churches. If we don't attend a church, then we only know what God is showing us and what we see in our homes, on the television, and by word of mouth on YouTube and such. But God is really gathering together His young people, and they are going to be used mightily in the days that are coming ahead. Right now, what's happening is pastors that are true pastors, truly serving Jesus Christ, not every pastor, and following God, they are being used to help these young people, to minister strength, to teach them. Also, parents as well, because I believe me and the other lady probably most likely symbolized sort of parents, because I have a 20-year-old and I have a 19-year-old son. I have a 15-year-old daughter and a son that's almost 13. So I think it's safe to say that definitely recognizes the parental involvement with these young people. But it's mostly young people. So God is bringing these young people together. He is teaching them. He's getting them ready for something. They probably don't even realize it. Most of them probably do not realize what is actually happening in their lives right now. Also, what is happening in the now is the first signs of something happening that I have been watching and waiting for it to happen. I believe that I, in this dream, in this part with the field, represent watchmen and intercessors and those who have been told that certain things are going to happen. I see in a way that this field represents America, and the lost in America, the harvest in America. And it's very sandy and dry, and it looks like a place where growth is impossible. But there's an encouraging message in this, and that is all things are possible with God. No matter how bad this country is, no matter what kind of state it is in, God can redeem it. And He's going to use His young people. He's going to use the people who are willing to bring the harvest. And we're going to see amazing things, growth, and lots of souls coming to Christ. As for the vision is more about the future. That's one thing I know. Like, the dream represents what God is doing right now. And the vision of the house is what is coming, is what's to come. And I prayed a lot about this, and I did a lot of searching through the scriptures about smoke and all the different times it shows that smoke is in the Old Testament and the New Testament. And I believe that's one thing that's good to do if you have a gift of interpretation, is always go to the Word and see what something is symbolizing, pretty much through the Word, and it'll give you an idea as to what it represents. And smoke, I don't see any fire, but I do know that fire, and God showed me this. He showed me a person holding a gun. This was just when I was praying about it. And I heard the words, ready, aim, fire. And when I heard that, I realized, okay, a fire in this sense, and the word fire, even with the gun, firing a gun, which, there's actual fire, smoke involved in that. a spark. Um, it's kind of the same thing. Smoke is represents, I think, an attack. It also, there was a strong representation of God's anger, God's power, God's ability. And many times I've found it represented God's judgment. And I have shared before, and I believe it firmly, that America is under the judgment of God right now. And so this smoke, I believe, the smoke represents the attack that God is going to allow to come on Christians in this nation. I believe it will happen many ways. I don't know all the ways, but I believe that in two of the ways will be through some attacks from Muslim extremists. I believe the other one will be through Christians who have compromised and bowed down to something other than Jesus and begins to serve it. And that's basically, we're talking about the Antichrist. Okay, if it's not the Antichrist, it is an Antichrist, and an Antichrist spirit that takes hold of those who profess to be Christians, but they end up compromising for reasons of fear and different other reasons. But the smoke comes in and it goes out. So the smoke, the actual fire of it, it doesn't touch us. The smoke doesn't leave even a mark on the house. Now, this doesn't mean that Christians aren't going to be heavily persecuted. Some of us may even be killed. I believe we will, some of us. I've seen too many visions of it. I've seen too many visions of being in captivity. And it's specifically Christians that I see in captivity, almost always. But this smoke kind of represents that. But it does not leave a mark, you know. It doesn't mean we're not going to hurt or suffer for Christ, which we should count as all glory. But it does mean that it is not going to defeat the church, because the gates of hell cannot come against the church. You know, it won't do it. It's impossible. God won't allow it. So God allows the judgment, which means he's probably going to allow enemies to come on and do things, just as he has all throughout the Old Testament. You'll see it time and again, where when the children of Israel disobeyed, he allowed their enemies to come in. When we look at Babylonia, it's probably one of the major ones with Daniel and Ezekiel and Jeremiah, who prophesied about it for 30 years, that this was going to happen if they didn't repent. Well, America's kind of going to be in this position, and the American church more specifically. So we're going to kind of come out clean. We're going to come out without harm. And then I believe as the judgment, the smoke goes out, that that represents something else too. I'm not going to give a specific belief on what that totally represents, because I'm just absolutely not sure, and I want to be more sure. I want to be sure before I share. I will say that I kind of have an idea that it has something to do with that continuing fire or smoke. That judgment is going to maybe come and attack and come through the church, but then it's going to come out. And what that causes in America or on the earth, I don't know. But it's probably not going to be a good thing, because it's going to be for those who have not repented. It's going to be for those who have not fully submitted. It's going to be for those who have compromised him in some way in their faith. So I want to encourage you to rejoice. Things are happening. They're happening fast. Miracles are happening. Young people are being raised up for a revival, I believe. Remember, church. Remember Christians who are watching. The greatest revivals that have ever happened in church history happened during times of oppression and persecution against the church. You know, people often don't realize that. So as we see persecution come, as we see oppression come, we need to remember that good things are going to come out of it as a result. God does not do he is not bringing judgment, and he's not going to allow us to be hurt and harmed and persecuted without a purpose to it. The purpose is to unify the body. And as we unify and we don't compromise, miracles are going to happen. And there are going to be so many people that will get saved. And I just hope this bears witness in your spirit, what I've just shared. I pray for each and every one of you. I love you, even if you don't like me. I love you. I really do. And I hope and pray that God blesses you immensely and gives you full preparation for the days ahead.